Hello and welcome to The Essential Reads. My name is Isaac, and my goal is to bring to you a bunch of classic audiobooks in an easy and accessible way. We are continuing with Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. This is the start of Part 6, Chapter 1. For Raskolnikov, a strange time began, as though a mist had suddenly fallen before him, enclosing him in a gloomy and desperate solitude. When he remembered this time later on, long afterwards, he was able to perceive that his awareness must at times have been dimmed, and that this must have gone on with various intervals right up until the final catastrophe. He was positively convinced that there were many things about those days concerning which he had been in error. The length of time that had elapsed between certain events, for example, and the dates at which they had occurred. At least, as he remembered it all subsequently, and endeavoured to make sense of it all, there were many things he discovered about himself, going merely on the information he received from other people who had happened to be present. He would, for example, confuse an event with one that bore no relation to it. Another event he would view as the consequence of one that only existed in his imagination. At times he was seized by a morbid and tormenting anxiety, which had even transformed itself into panic terror. But he also recalled that there had been minutes, hours, and even possibly days full of an apathy that had taken hold of him as though in contrast to his earlier terror. An apathy similar to the morbid, indifferent consideration of certain people on their deathbeds. In general, during those final days, he tried more or less to flee from any clear and complete understanding of his position. Certain vital facts that demanded instant clarification were a particular source of depression to him. There were, however, other worries which he would have given anything to escape and shake himself free. Because in the situation he was in, to forget about them threatened him with total and inevitable disaster. Svidrigailov had caused him particular anxiety. One might even have said that he was, in a sense, fixated on Svidrigailov. From the first time that Svidrigailov had spoken those threatening words, whose import was all too clear to him in Sonya's lodgings at the moment of Katerina Ivanovna's death, the normal flow of his thoughts seemed to have been broken. But in spite of being extremely worried by this new event, Raskolnikov seemed to delay in seeking an explanation for it. At times, as for example, finding himself one day in some remote and scheduled district of the city, alone at a table of some wretched inn, sunk in reflection and hardly conscious of how he had ended up there, he would suddenly remember Svidrigailov. He would suddenly become all too clearly and uneasily aware that he ought to come to some arrangement with that man, and, as far as it was possible, settle the matter once and for all. On one occasion, having wandered to some place beyond the city boundaries, he even fancied that he was waiting for Svidrigailov, and that they had agreed to meet there. On another occasion, he awoke before dawn to find himself somewhere on the ground, in the midst of some bushes, with almost no inkling of how he had strayed there. There was also the fact that during those 2 or 3 days that followed the death of Katerina Ivanovna, he had actually met Svidrigailov a few times, almost invariably in Sonya's lodgings, where he would look in more or less without purpose, but always only for a moment. They would always bandy a few words, but never once spoke about the capital point, as though they had agreed to keep quiet about that for the time being. The body of Katerina Ivanovna still lay in its coffin. Svidrigailov dealt with the arrangements for the funeral, fussing around. Sonya was also very preoccupied. During their last meeting, Svidrigailov had explained to Raskolnikov that he had managed to solve the problem of what to do about Katerina Ivanovna's children, and that the solution was a successful one. That thanks to some connections he had, certain persons had been contacted, with whose help all 3 orphans could be placed at once in institutions that were thoroughly suitable for them. That the money which had been put aside for them had also helped in many respects, as it was far easier to place orphans with capital than orphans who were destitute. He also said something about Sonya, promising to look in on Raskolnikov himself in a day or two's time, saying that he wanted to ask his advice, that it was essential that they had a word or two together, that there were certain matters. This conversation took place out in the passage by the staircase. Svidrigailov looked fixedly into Raskolnikov's eyes, and then suddenly, after a pause, and with his voice lowered, inquired, "But what's the matter with you, Rodion Romanovich? You don't seem at all yourself. You listen and look, yet you don't seem to take anything in. You must pull yourself together. Look, we'll have a talk. It's just a pity I have so much business to attend to. Both my own and other people's." "Ah, Rodion Romanovich, sir," he added suddenly. "All human beings need air, air, air. That above all else." He suddenly stepped aside in order to let a priest and a deacon pass up the stairs. They were going to perform the service for the dead. In accordance with the arrangements he had made, these services were being held punctually twice a day. Svidrigailov continued his rounds. Raskolnikov stood for a while in reflection, and then followed the priest into Sonya's lodgings. He stood in the doorway. Quietly, decorously, mournfully, the service was beginning. In the consciousness of death and the sense of its presence, there had always been for him something gloom-ridden and mystically horrible, ever since he had been a child. It was also a long time since he had heard a funeral mass sung. But there was something else, too. Something that contained an excess of horror and disquiet. He looked at the children. They were all on their knees beside the coffin, and Polya was crying. Behind them, weeping quietly and almost timidly, Sonya was praying. "You know, she hasn't looked at me once during these last few days, and she hasn't said a word to me," Raskolnikov suddenly thought. The smoke from the censer rose in clouds as the priest sang, "Make their souls to rest, O Lord." Raskolnikov stood throughout the entire service. As he performed the blessing and the parting, the priest seemed to look around him strangely. After the service, Raskolnikov went over to Sonya. She suddenly took him by both hands and leant her head against his shoulder. This brief gesture struck Raskolnikov with intense bewilderment. It was positively uncanny. What? Did she feel not the slightest revulsion? Not the slightest loathing for him? Was there not the slightest tremor in her hand? This was some strange infinity of self-humiliation. That, at any rate, was how he read it. Sonya did not say anything. Raskolnikov gave her hand a squeeze and went out. He had begun to feel horribly gloomy. If it had been possible for him to go away somewhere just then and be completely alone, even though it were to be for the rest of his life, he would have counted himself a lucky man. The difficulty was that even though he had been almost constantly alone during these recent days, he had never once felt that he was alone. On occasion, he had strolled into the suburbs, walked out along the high road, once even wandered into some wood or other. But the more secluded the location, the more powerfully he had seemed to sense someone else's close and disturbing presence. Not a particularly frightening one, but a very irritating one, with the result that he quickly went back into town, mingled with the crowd, went into the inns and drinking dens, visited the second-hand stalls, the Haymarket. There he felt easier, even more secluded. There was one eating house where, towards evening, people began singing songs. He sat for a whole hour listening, and he recalled that he had really enjoyed himself very much. In the end, however, he had suddenly felt anxious again. It was as though his conscience had begun to bother him. "Here I am, sitting listening to songs when it's the last thing I ought to be doing," he found himself thinking. What was more, he instantly realized that this was not the only thing that was bothering him. There was some problem that demanded an immediate solution. But what it was, he could neither formulate in his mind nor give utterance to in words. Everything seemed to have wound itself into some kind of ball. No. Better to resume the struggle again. Better Porfiry again. Or Svidrigailov. What I want is some kind of challenge again. An attack from someone to fend off. Yes. Yes. That's what I want. He thought. He left the eating house and very nearly broke into a run. For some reason, the thought of Dunya and his mother had suddenly filled him with panic terror. That night he had woken up before dawn in some bushes on Krestovsky Island, chilled to the very core in a fever. He had set off home at once, arriving there in the early morning. After a few hours of sleep, the fever had passed, but when he woke up it was late, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He remembered that today was the day of Katerina Ivanovna's funeral, and he felt relieved at having missed it. Nastasia brought him some food. He ate and drank with great appetite, almost with voracity. His head was clearer, and he felt calmer than he had done these last 3 days. He even had a fleeting sense of wonder when he remembered his earlier panic terror. The door opened, and in walked Razumikhin. Ha! He's eating, so he can't be ill, Razumikhin said, taking a chair and sitting down at the table facing Raskolnikov. He was worried, and made no attempt to conceal the fact. He spoke with visible annoyance, but without hurrying, and without particularly raising his voice. One could suppose that some special resolve, exclusive of all else, had taken root in him. Listen, he began decisively. I don't give a damn about any of you, but the way I see this business now, I'm quite clear about one thing. And that's that I'm completely baffled. Please don't think that I've come to interrogate you. I couldn't care a spit about that. Nothing could be further from my mind. Even if you were to reveal everything to me, all your secrets, I probably wouldn't listen. I'd spit and leave. The only reason I've come here is in order to find out once and for all, person to person, whether it's true that you're mad or not. You see, there's a conviction in certain quarters, just somewhere around, that you may be a madman, or have a very decided leaning that way. I must confess to you that I myself have been strongly inclined to support that opinion. In the first place, because of the stupid and rather vile things you've been doing. Things that defy all explanation. And in the second place, because of your recent behavior towards your mother and sister. Only a monster and a villain, if not a madman, could have acted towards them the way you have. And consequently, you're a madman. When did you see them? I've only just left them. And I suppose you haven't seen them since that day, have you? Where is it you go getting around? Tell me that, will you, please? I've already been here 3 times looking for you. Your mother has been seriously ill ever since yesterday. She wanted to come and see you. Evdotia Romanovna tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. If he's ill, she said, if his mind's disturbed, who's going to help him if not his own mother? So we all came here. We couldn't just leave her on her own. We kept begging her to calm down all the way to your door. We came in, but you weren't there. She sat right there. She went on sitting for 10 minutes while we stood over her, not saying a word. Then she got up and said, if he's gone out, he must be all right. And he's forgotten about his mother. And in that case, it's not at all the right thing for his mother to do, to stand on his threshold begging for kindness like alms. She ought to be ashamed. We went out and took her to bed. Now she has a fever. I can see he has time for that girl of his, she said. She thinks Sofya Semyonova's your fiancée or your mistress or something. I don't know. I immediately went off to see Sofya Semyonova because, brother, I wanted to find out the whole story. When I got there, I looked. The coffin was there. The children were crying. Sofya Semyonova was measuring them, making little mourning outfits for them. You weren't there. I took a glance round, made my excuses, and left, and then went back and reported to Evdotia Romanovna. So all that was nonsense. And there was no girl of yours. and so the likeliest explanation was madness. But here you are, wolfing boiled beef as though you hadn't eaten for 3 days. Oh, I know that madmen eat too. But even though you haven't said a word to me yet, I know that you're not mad. That I will swear. Anything else, but not mad. And so I say the devil take you all. Because there's some sort of mystery here. Some sort of secret. And I don't intend to cudgel my brain over your secrets. I've simply come in order to shout at you. He concluded, getting up. To let off steam. And I know what I'm going to do now. What are you going to do? What business is it of yours? You'd better be careful. You're going out to get drunk. How did you know? There. I was right, wasn't I? Razumikhin said nothing for a moment. You've always been a very cool-headed chap, and you've never ever been mad. He said suddenly, with heat. You're right. I am going out to get drunk. Goodbye. And he started to go. I was talking about you to my sister, Razumikhin. The day before yesterday, I think it was. About me? But where could you have seen her the day before yesterday? Razumikhin said, coming to a sudden halt, and even turning a little pale. One could guess that his heart was beating slowly and violently within him. She came here on her own. She sat here and talked to me. She did? Yes, she did. What did you tell her? About me, I mean. I told her that you were a very good, honest, and hard-working man. I didn't tell her that you love her, because she already knows that. She does? There I go, right again. Wherever I go, whatever happens to me, you must remain their providence. I'm going to hand them over to you, as it were, Razumikhin. I say that because I'm fully aware how much you love her, and I'm convinced of the purity of your heart. I also know that she might be able to love you, and may even do so already. Now make your decision as you think fit, whether you should go out and get drunk or not. Roger, old chap. Look, I mean, oh, the devil. But where are you going? Look, if this is all a secret, then forget it. But I'll find out your secret. And I'm absolutely certain that it's a lot of nonsense. And pernicious nonsense at that. And that you dreamed it all up yourself. The fact is that in spite of it all, you're really an excellent chap. A most excellent chap. What I was going to add before you interrupted me was that you made a very sensible choice just now in saying that you didn't intend to find out what these mysteries and secrets are. Leave it for the time being. Don't trouble your head about it. You'll know everything in good time. When it's right for you to know. Yesterday, a man told me that what human beings need is air. Air. I intend to go and see him now, and ask him what he meant by that. Razumikhin stood in agitated reflection, trying to make sense of it all. He's mixed up in a political conspiracy. He must be. And he's on the point of making some decisive step. It's for certain. There can be no other explanation. And Dunya knows. He suddenly thought to himself. So Evdotia Romanovna comes to see you, he said, making the words scan in rhythm. And you want to go and see a man who says that what's needed is more air. More air, and I suppose that letter is also a part of it. He concluded, almost to himself. What letter? She had a letter today. It upset her terribly. Terribly. You have no idea. I started talking about you. She asked me to be quiet. Then she said that we might soon be saying goodbye to each other. And then she began to thank me for something in an effusive sort of way. Then she went back to her room and wouldn't talk to me anymore. She had the letter? Raskolnikov asked reflectively. Yes, that's right. Didn't you know? They both said nothing. Goodbye, Rodion. You know, brother, there was a time when I... But it doesn't matter. Goodbye. You see, there was a time... Well, goodbye. I must be going too. I shan't do any drinking. I don't need to now. Oh, you're making it all up. He began to hurry. As he was on his way out, however, and having almost closed the door behind him, he suddenly opened it again and said, looking rather to one side, Oh, by the way, you remember that murder? The one Porfiry was talking about. You know, the old woman. Well, listen, they found the murderer. He turned himself in and provided all the evidence himself. It was one of those workmen, the decorators. Just imagine. You remember how I was defending them? Would you believe it? He purposely arranged that scene on the stairs, laughing and fighting with his mate as the others, the yard keeper and the two other witnesses, were going up. It was meant to create a diversion. What cunning! What presence of mind in such a young puppy! It's hard to credit. Yet he showed persistence, confessed the whole thing. And how I went and fell for it. Oh well, in my opinion, that fellow's nothing more nor less than a genius of dissimulation and inventiveness. A genius of the juridical ploy. And I suppose there's nothing particularly astonishing about it. Are there really people like that? What gives him even more credibility in my eyes is the fact that he became a victim of his own temperament and confessed. That makes it all the more plausible. But, oh, how I put my foot in it that time. I was practically climbing up and down the walls in my zeal to defend them. I say, I wonder if you'd mind telling me where you found out about this and why it interests you so much. Raskolnikov asked, visibly perturbed. Now there's a question. Why does it interest me? You can seriously ask that? Why, I found out from Porfiry, among other people. Actually, I found out nearly all of it from him. From Porfiry? That's right. What did he say? Raskolnikov asked in a frightened voice. He cleared it all up for me in the most excellent manner. Gave me a psychological elucidation after his own method. He did? He cleared it up for you? Yes, he himself. But look, goodbye for now. I must be off. I'll tell you about it later, but right now I've business to attend to. I must say, there was one moment when I thought... Oh, but never mind. Later. I've no need to go off binging now. You've made me drunk without my ever going near the stuff. I mean, I'm drunk, Rodka. I'm drunk without vodka. Well, goodbye. I'll look in again very soon. He went out. He's mixed up in a political conspiracy. It's the only possible explanation, Razumikhin said to himself with decisive finality as he slowly went down the stairs. And he's drawn his sister into it too. That may very, very easily be in keeping with Avdotya Romanovna's character. They've been having secret meetings. Why, she's hinted as much to me herself. If one pieces together some of the things she said, and have said, and hinted, it all falls into place quite neatly. How else is one to throw any light onto this tangled business? And yet I thought... Oh, merciful God! What didn't I think? No, that was some kind of brainstorm, and I'm guilty before him. It was he who brought it on, that brainstorm, when we were standing under the lamp in the corridor that time. Ugh, what a base, vulgar, loathsome thought on my part. Good for you, Mikolka, coming clean like that. It explains so many other things that have happened. His illness that time, that strange behavior of his. Even earlier, when he was still at the university. How gloomy and morose he always was. But what's the meaning of this letter now? It may very well have something to do with the whole business, too. Who is it from? It makes me suspicious. No. I'm going to find out everything. He suddenly remembered all the things he had observed and deduced about Dunya, and his heart sank within him. He dashed out of the building and set off at a run. No sooner had Razumikhin left than Raskolnikov got up, turned towards the window, slouched over to one corner, then to another, as though he had forgotten how narrow his room was, and sat down on the sofa again. He seemed an entirely new man. Once again, the struggle. That meant there was still a way out. Yes, it means there's still a way out. Everything's been far too closed in and confined. It's getting so I can hardly breathe. As though I've in some kind of trance. Ever since that scene with Mikolka in Porfiry's chambers, he had begun to choke without any outlet in narrow constrictions. After his encounter with Mikolka that same day, there had been the scene with Sonya. Its development and conclusion had not been at all the way he had imagined beforehand. That meant he had lost his strength momentarily and radically, in a single flash. And yet he had concurred with Sonya that day. Concurred with all his heart in her assertion that he would not be able to live alone with a deed like that on his soul. And Svidrigailov? Svidrigailov was a mystery. Svidrigailov caused him anxiety, it was true. But somehow not in that particular connection. He thought there might also be a possibility of a further struggle with Svidrigailov ahead. Svidrigailov might also be a way out. But Porfiry was another matter. So Porfiry had cleared it all up for Razumikhin, explained it to him in psychological terms. He dragged in that accursed psychology of his again. Porfiry. How could Porfiry believe even for a moment that Mikolka was guilty after what had taken place between them that day, after that scene, face to face, before Mikolka had made his confession, and which was only open to one possible interpretation? In these last few days, Raskolnikov had several times remembered the whole of that scene with Porfiry in fleeting fragments. He was unable to endure the memory of it as a totality. The words that had passed between them, the movements and gestures there had been, the looks they had exchanged, the tones of voice they had used, all of that had reached a point where no Mikolka, whom Porfiry had seen through right from his very first word and gesture, no Mikolka could have shaken the bedrock of his conviction. What was he to think? Even Razumikhin had begun to have his suspicions. The scene under the lamp in the corridor had not taken place without reason. Razumikhin had gone running off to Porfiry. But what had the latter's purpose been in pulling the wool over his eyes like this? What did he hope to gain by diverting Razumikhin's attention towards Mikolka? Yes, he must be up to something. There was a plan here. But what was it? It was true that much time had passed since that morning. Far too much time. And during all of it, there had been no sign of Porfiry whatsoever. And that, of course, could only be for the worse. Raskolnikov took his cap, and, after some reflection, walked out of the room. That was the first day in all that time that he had at least felt in control of his reason. I must have done with Svidrigailov, he thought, and at whatever cost, as soon as possible. I think he's also waiting for me to come to him of my own accord. And at that moment, there was such a burst of sudden hatred from his tired heart that he might very well have killed one of them. Either Svidrigailov or Porfiry. At any rate, he felt that even if he was unable to do it now, he would be in the future. We shall see, he kept saying to himself. But no sooner had he opened the door onto the stairs than he suddenly collided with Porfiry himself. Porfiry had come to see him. For a single moment, Raskolnikov froze petrified. But only for that single moment. It was strange. He was not particularly surprised to see Porfiry, and was not even at all that afraid of him. He merely shuddered, but then quickly and instantaneously gathered his wits in preparation. Perhaps this is the denouement. But why has he crept up on the sly, like a cat, without my being aware of it? Did you overhear what we were saying? An unexpected visitor for you, Rodion Romanovich. Porfiry Petrovich shouted, laughing. I've long been meaning to drop in on you, and as I was passing this way, I thought, why not look in for 5 minutes and pay you a visit? Are you off somewhere? I shan't detain you. I'll just have one cigarette, if you'll be so good. Very well, Porfiry Petrovich. Sit down, sit down. Raskolnikov said, finding his visitor a chair with such an obviously pleased and friendly look that he would have been struck with wonder had he been able to see himself. The leavings, the dregs, were being scraped out. Sometimes, in similar fashion, a man will endure half an hour of mortal terror at the hands of a brigand. Yet when the knife is finally put to his throat, even his terror passes. He sat down in front of Porfiry, and, without so much as a blink, gazed at him. Porfiry narrowed his eyes and began to light his cigarette. Well, go on then, go on! The words seemed to be on the point of leaping out of Raskolnikov's heart. Go on! Why don't you tell me what it is you've got to say? Thank you so very much for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, share, all that jazz, and if you really enjoyed, do subscribe, because there is more to come. If you're listening on podcast, please leave a review, as it helps get this in front of as many people as possible, and reading your reviews really makes my day. If you want to support the show further, just listen to the show on Spotify while you're sleeping to help me get the monetization requirements that I need there. Or you can click on the Ko-Fi link, which is now on screen, and do a direct donation to me, or you can also do a super thanks on YouTube. That also exists as an option. Once again, thank you very, very much for listening. And until next time, bye-bye.